Hello. Today I'll be talking about the ways we can use sources in our writing, and in particular a very important W131 heuristic called source as lens. More than anything, using a source as a lens is a habit of mind. It's a method of analysis that allows us to see things we otherwise would not. Another way of thinking about it is that it allows us to think through one text in the terms of another. This is something we could have done during Essay 1. Basically, we extract the key concepts or methods from one text and apply them to another to see what we can. However, it might be useful to think of the situation this way. Lenses are the part of glasses that help focus blurry vision. Your source then becomes a lens that brings into focus certain aspects of the text you could not see before. To make this point even clearer, let's briefly outline the four basic ways we can make sources speak in our writing. First, we might use sources for illustrating a point. This is when a source is used as an example. We also might use sources to authorize. This is when a source is used as an unproblematic support of a point, that is, as general evidence. We also might borrow a source. That's when we take words or ideas from another source and use them to look at something new. And we also might extend sources, and that's when our object of analysis puts a new spin on the borrowed terms and ideas from a different source. This is all covered in more detail in Writing Analytically, pages 186 and 187. The first two modes are very important ways of using sources, as they constitute the basic building blocks of citation and evidence gathering we learned in Unit 1. However, our primary concern now will be with the final two modes, since together they constitute the basic modes of sources lens. In sources lens, you not only borrow a key concept from another source in order to look at something new, but your object of analysis allows you to extend the concept in new and exciting ways by taking into account what your object of analysis brings into view. I'll explain this with an example from history, specifically the history of science. You probably recognize this by sight. It's a diagram of an atom with a collection of protons and neutrons in the center surrounded by orbiting electrons. Now, here's the thing. Atoms are really, really, really small, so we can't actually see them. This diagram is what scientists call a model of an atom. This particular model, called the Rutherford-Bohr model, was developed in 1913, and when it was proposed, it was explicitly compared to the way our solar system itself was structured, with a central solar nucleus around which smaller bodies were in orbit. Before Rutherford and Bohr, however, there was a different model, called the plum pudding model proposed by J.J. Thomson in 1904. Thomson's research led him to suggest that atoms were fairly solid, singular objects. He proposed that they consisted of a positively charged block of matter sprinkled throughout with negatively charged electrons. To explain his idea, he compared it to a plum pudding, a British dessert similar to a muffin, where tasty bits of fruit are suspended throughout a piece of sweetened bread. Thomson borrowed the idea of plum pudding as a lens to explain the structure of the atom. However, further research presented a complication. Both Rutherford and Bohr, 10 years later, could ascertain that atoms were not solid blocks, as suggested by the plum pudding model. That is, thinking through the lens of plum pudding ignored some important facts. Rutherford and Bohr said that atoms were not totally solid, but consisted of electrons surrounding, at varying distances, a smaller, denser nucleus. But again, they could not actually see what atoms looked like. We can see the solar system, and we know how it is structured, as a single unit made of different parts at different distances from each other. So, like Thomson before them, they borrowed a structure to use it as a lens in order to explain how atoms are put together. And it's been very, very successful. The Rutherford-Bohr model is probably how most people picture atoms when they're asked to imagine them. Progress in the sciences in the past century has complicated this model, however. We don't have to get into details, but quantum physics tells us that electrons probably aren't discrete little orbs that zoom around on a single track like planets around a sun. In fact, quantum physics suggests that electrons move instantaneously and probabilistically, meaning that they don't have set locations. So, yeah, they're definitely not like planets. To this end, the model has become complicated, and modern science has extended it by comparing atoms to a weird sort of cloud, so it looks something like this. We know there's a denser positive core, but the electrons orbiting it are hazier and indistinct. The idea of an atom as a cloud helps because it is something that, in one way, appears solid, but is really a collection of vapor. This particular lens emphasizes the diffuse and strange nature of atoms. The truth of the atom isn't something we can hold in our hands, but rather somewhere between these lenses. Each one is a lens that highlights certain aspects of atomic structure and obscures others. It pulls some things into focus, but at the same time, it pushes others out. In this class, we're not expecting you to change the world of physics, but we do expect you to be able to borrow, complicate, and extend lenses to bring certain aspects of texts into focus. This means taking lessons from your raw essays, especially your keystone reading, and using them to see things in your analysis you otherwise would not. Instead of thinking through atomic structure in terms of the structure of the solar system, or pudding, or clouds, what happens if you think through a film scene in terms of its representations of race, class, gender, or whatever larger themes your raw essays have pointed out to you? To effectively use a source as a lens, you should extract a key concept or method from one of your raw essays. This is your lens. And as you use it to analyze the representations in a text, be sure to look for the complications, the things that don't quite fit or don't quite come into focus, and use those opportunities to extend the lens to make something slightly different or new that lets you better describe the phenomena that you're seeing. Accomplishing these goals is the key to Unit 2. Remember to review our selections in writing analytically, and be sure to address any questions to your instructor.